My brother and I were both 15 when we first saw something we couldn't explain. Something that, even now, refuses to make sense no matter how many times we replay it in our minds. For the longest time, we just called it the alien. We had no other name for it, no better way to describe what we saw that night. We grew up in a rural part of Michigan, isolated enough to be unnerving after dark, but not so far removed that we didn't have neighbors scattered a ways down the road. Farmland and dense, quiet woods surrounded most of our area, a patchwork of empty cornfields and gnarled trees that always seemed too still at night. This was back when Call of Duty was still in its prime, before it all went stale. We used to sink hours into it, just two kids wired on soda and adrenaline, playing late into the night with the glow of the screen lighting up our dark room. We also played airsoft whenever we could, collecting gear and talking tactics like we were part of some elite unit. I had a decent setup with black tactical gear, and my brother had a full ghillie suit that he spent weeks modifying with twine, burlap, and bits of brush. It was sometime around 2 a.m. when boredom hit us. The game was getting stale, and we needed something real, something to spike our blood a little. On a whim, we decided to sneak out and do a mock night raid up the road, just to see how stealthy we could be, getting out of the house and into the dark without waking our parents. We grabbed our gear, loaded up with walkie-talkies for communication, and each took one side of the dead-end gravel road that led past our house and up toward the open farmland half a mile away. I was on the right side of the road, dressed in black and sticking to the ditch line. My brother, fully suited in his ghillie, moved through the sparse cover along the left, where the woods pressed close to the edge. The night was silent in that peculiar way rural nights often are. No wind, no crickets, just stillness, like the whole world was holding its breath. We were giggling into the calms like idiots, congratulating ourselves on being so sneaky. It was all just harmless fun, until it wasn't. We were maybe a quarter of the way up the road, when something shifted, something subtle, but instantly wrong. I glanced towards the tree line on my brother's side, dark silhouettes of trees fading into deeper shadows behind them. But something there wasn't right. It took me a few seconds to register it. At first, I thought it might be a trick of the eyes. Then my stomach dropped. There was something standing behind the trees, something too tall, something still. I squinted hard, heart hammering in my chest. It wasn't moving, just standing there, lanky, distorted. I could make out all the details, but one thing that burned itself into my brain were the eyes. Red, not glowing like an animal's eyes, catching a bit of light, no. These were unnatural. They burned like twin embers, locked directly onto my brother. I tried to stay calm as I pressed the button on the walkie. "Hey, move to my side of the road," I said. He hesitated, confused. "Why?" "Just do it now, please," I said. Something in my voice must have cut through the confusion, because he didn't ask again. I heard his feet crunch against the gravel as he sprinted across to me. A shadow breaking from the trees, he reached me, panting slightly, and I opened my mouth to warn him, to tell him what I had seen, but I didn't need to. His eyes locked onto the spot where he'd just been standing. He froze. The color drained from his face. "Dude," he whispered, not looking away. "What the hell is that?" That confirmed it. We were both seeing it. This wasn't some shared delusion or sleep-deprived hallucination. It was real, right there, just beyond the edge of the woods. We started spitballing explanations. Owl decoy? No, too tall, too human-shaped, and no branches nearby for it to perch on. Optical illusion? Maybe. But how were we both seeing the same thing in the same place? We tried to rationalize it, desperate to make it something ordinary. And then it moved. Not a lot, just a small shift. Like it was adjusting its weight or leaning forward. But it was enough. We both gasped at the same time. That quiet breath of terror you don't mean to let out. No more games, no more doubt. We didn't speak, we just looked at each other, wide-eyed and pale. My brother raised a hand. On 3, he said. 1. We didn't wait for 2. We ran. We bolted down the road, our footsteps pounding the gravel like war drums in the dead of night. We didn't speak, didn't look back. Something in our bones told us not to. That looking back might confirm something we weren't ready to accept, or worse, invite it. I don't think we've ever run so fast. The entire way back to the house was a blur of panicked breath and slamming hearts. When we finally reached the porch and slammed the door shut behind us, we stood in the entryway, gasping for air, barely able to speak. Our parents never woke up. That was the first time we saw it. There were other sightings after that, some clear, some worse, but that first encounter, it changed everything. The air in those woods never felt the same again. It was the kind of trip a child looks forward to, a summer escape to a family friend's secluded cabin on Miller Mountain in West Virginia. The air was always crisp in the mornings, the mountain shrouded in mist that seemed to rise from the forest floor like a living thing. It was the perfect setting for a young child to explore, to run wild and free through the thick woods surrounding the cabin. But one particular afternoon, the adventures took a dark turn. The child, no older than 6, had been outside for hours, their laughter echoing through the trees as they played in the warm afternoon sun. Their younger sibling was with them, running alongside, as they ventured deeper into the woods, away from the safety of the cabin. The further they went, the more the sounds of nature seemed to fall away. The birds stopped singing, the rustling of the leaves grew hushed. There was an unnatural stillness, a quiet that pressed against their chest like an invisible weight. It was the silence that caught their attention first. The child stopped in their tracks, eyes scanning the dense trees. The air, once warm and welcoming, now felt cold. It wasn't the chill of a breeze. It was the kind of cold that settled into your bones, the kind of cold that made every hair on the back of your neck stand on end. They turned, feeling an unshakable sense of being watched, and that's when they saw it. Standing just at the edge of the tree line was a figure. At first, the child thought it was another person, maybe one of the other visitors to the cabin. But the longer they stared, the more they realized it was something far worse. The creature was tall, unnaturally tall. Its figure was disturbingly thin, almost skeletal, with skin stretched taut over its bones. The pale, waxy complexion of its flesh glowed faintly, as if it were sickly, and there was no sign of any clothing or distinguishing marks on its body. It stood perfectly still, unmoving like a statue, but its eyes, those glowing eyes, locked onto the child with a gaze that felt almost tangible. Its eyes weren't human. They were too large, too wide, with an unnatural brightness that seemed to pierce the growing gloom of the forest. They glowed with an eerie light that reminded the child of something unholy. The figure's stare was intense, unmoving. It felt as if it could see straight through them, deep into their very soul. The child felt a surge of terror wash over them, their heart pounding in their chest. It was an overwhelming, primal fear, the kind that freezes you in place, making it impossible to run. Every instinct screamed at them to flee, to get away, but their body refused to obey. They were trapped, held in place by that unrelenting gaze. The air grew heavier, and the silence around them seemed to thicken, pressing down on their chest. It wasn't just the figure that terrified them. It was the sense of dread that seemed to emanate from it. The woods had gone silent, the air had grown cold, and there was something deeply wrong about the way it just stood there, watching. It wasn't just human. It wasn't just an animal. It was something otherworldly, something ancient. Time seemed to stretch endlessly. The child couldn't move, couldn't tear their gaze away from those glowing eyes. For what felt like hours, they stood frozen, rooted to the spot by terror creeping up their spine. They had no words, no ability to scream or shout. It was as if the very presence of the creature had robbed them of their voice. And then, just as suddenly as it appeared, the child's body jerked back into motion. A surge of adrenaline kicked in, and without thinking they turned and ran. They didn't look back, didn't dare to check if the creature had moved. They just ran, their feet pounding the earth beneath them, breath coming in sharp, terrified gasps. As they sprinted back toward the cabin, the sense of being chased, though there was no sound of footsteps behind them, gnawed at their mind. The cold dread that had gripped their chests did not leave. Their feet didn't slow down until they reached the cabin's porch, the door slamming shut behind them with a finality that seemed to banish the terror. Inside the cabin, the children were breathless, shaking uncontrollably, their hands trembling as they tried to explain what they had seen. The tall, pale figure with glowing eyes. They recounted the chilling gaze, the coldness in the air, the overwhelming sense of being watched. But when the child tried to share the details with the adults, they were met with skepticism. The family brushed it off, dismissing it as a trick of the light, a figment of an overactive imagination. It was just a shadow, they said, probably a deer or some other animal in the woods. The child was told to go to bed, their fears written off as something more than a childish fantasy. But that night, sleep did not come easy. They lied awake, eyes wide open, staring at the shadows in the corners of the cabin, wondering if the pale figure was still out there, watching, waiting. Years later, as an adult, they would find themselves searching online, reading stories about cryptids and creatures lurking in the darkness. It was then that they stumbled upon the Rake. The description of the creature was eerily similar to the thing they had seen in the woods that summer afternoon. The glowing eyes, the gaunt skeletal body, the feeling of being watched, of something unnatural lingering in the shadows. The pieces clicked together, and the truth became undeniable. What they had seen that day was no mere figment of imagination. It had been the Rake, or something like it. The terror of that moment still haunted them, even after all those years. Every time they closed their eyes, they could still see the glowing eyes of that creature, locked onto them, watching, waiting. I had never felt more alone than on that fateful night. The long, empty road stretched out before her, winding through the dense woods of rural America. It was well past midnight, and the only light was the dim glow of her car's headlights, cutting through the oppressive darkness. The silence was deafening, broken only by the hum of the engine and the occasional rustle of leaves outside. There was something unsettling about the isolation. It was the kind of night that made every crack in the trees sound like footsteps, and every gust of wind feel like a whisper from something unseen. She had driven this road countless times before, but tonight something felt wrong. Her eyes kept darting to the rearview mirror, but the darkness remained thick, hiding any hint of movement. The feeling of being watched crept up her spine, though she tried to ignore it, focusing on the road ahead. That was until she saw it. A figure stood by the side of the road, barely visible in the dim light. At first, she thought it was a shadow cast by the trees, or maybe a deer, but as she drove closer, the truth was impossible to deny. It was too tall, too unnatural. Her heart skipped a beat as the figure became clear. A thin, pale shape standing still, its form impossible to make out in the night. Her foot instinctively pressed harder on the brake, slowing the car as she neared the strange figure. It was almost human, but not quite. There was something deeply wrong with it. The creature was impossibly thin, its limbs long and unnaturally gaunt, stretching out at angles that made her stomach churn. Its skin was pale, almost translucent, a sickly shade that reminded her of something long dead. She could make out no hair on its head, only the smooth, ghostly flesh of its skull. The eyes, black hollow pits, seemed to reflect no light at all. They locked onto hers, and for a moment the world seemed to stop. Her breath caught in her throat. Something primal in her screamed that she should look away, that she should drive faster, but her eyes were glued to the figure. There was no escape. She felt its gaze, cold and piercing, as if it were looking straight into her very soul. And then it happened. The creature opened its mouth, wide, impossibly wide, and emitted a sound that would haunt her forever. It was a scream, yes, but not like anything she had ever heard before. It was sharp, high-pitched, the kind of scream that dug into your bones and sent an icy dread crawling up your spine. It was the sound of something not entirely human. Her heart slammed against her chest as the scream echoed in her ears, louder and louder, until it seemed to reverberate through her entire body. Her instinct screamed at her to get out of there, to drive away, but her body wouldn't obey. She watched, frozen, as the creature darted toward the woods, its movements quick and unnatural. One moment it was there, in full view, and the next it vanished into the shadows, like it never existed at all. She slammed her foot on the gas pedal, tires screeching as she sped away. Her hands were shaking as she gripped the wheel, and the world outside the car seemed to blur into a smudge of dark shapes. Her mind raced to make sense of what she had seen, but there was no logical explanation. She had to have imagined it. It was just some kind of weird hallucination, right? The image of those hollow black eyes, those soulless pits, would not leave her. Weeks passed, but the memory lingered. The sight of the pale creature haunted her every night. And then, just as she thought she might be able to put it behind her, it happened again. This time, she wasn't alone. Her mother, who had been visiting, was in the passenger seat. She had tried to shake the unsettling memories of that first encounter, telling herself that it was just her mind playing tricks on her. She never thought she'd see that thing again, but as they drove down the same road one evening, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It started with the same sensation, the eerie, inexplicable feeling that they weren't alone. The air in the car felt thick, oppressive. Her mother glanced out the window, sensing the same unease. And then, just like before, they saw it. The creature was standing by the side of the road, waiting. Its thin form almost seemed to blend in with the darkness around it. But its presence was undeniable. Her heart skipped in her chest, her grip tightening on the steering wheel. Her mother, seeing the panic on her daughter's face, asked what was wrong. She barely managed to whisper, "Look." Her mother followed her gaze, and her face went pale as she saw the same nightmarish figure standing there, motionless, watching them. The creature didn't move at first, its eyes fixated on them, unblinking. The same sickly pallor of its skin seemed even more disturbing, now that she had her mother as a witness. There was no mistaking it. This was the thing she had seen before. The same skeletal limbs, the same black eyes, the same wide, gaping mouth. It was almost as though it had been waiting for them. But this time it didn't scream. This time it didn't run. Instead, it began to move towards the car. Her breath stuck in her throat, and her mother gasped, gripping the door handle as if she were about to jump out of the car. The driver slammed the gas pedal, and the car surged forward, tires spinning. She didn't look back. She couldn't. She just drove, faster and faster, her heart pounding in her chest as it might burst. The creature remained in a rearview mirror, a dark figure in the distance, vanishing as the night swallowed it whole. When they reached home, both were shaken to their cores. Her mother was silent, but she could see the fear in her eyes. Neither of them spoke about what had happened, but both knew that something had followed them, something that shouldn't exist. It was a presence so wrong, so unnatural, that it couldn't possibly be explained. Driven by a need to understand what she had seen, she begins her research for answers. What was this thing? What had they encountered? Research led her to something even more unsettling. She found reports from other people, scattered across forums and social media, of similar creatures, pale, emaciated figures with black eyes, moving with unnatural speed. Some called them rakes, others referred to them as crawlers or skinwalkers. Each report was eerily similar to her own encounter, and the more she dug, the more she found. People had been seeing these creatures for years, in different places, at different times. The sightings seemed to cluster in isolated areas, near forests or stretches of rural road, where the boundaries between the known world and the unknown felt thinner. The stories were chilling, and yet they mirrored her own experience way too closely to ignore. She had once hoped that the creature she saw was a trick of the mind, a manifestation of fear in the dark. But now she knew better. Whatever it was real. And she wasn't alone. The terror of those encounters would stay with her forever. But more than that, it drove her to understand the unexplainable, to delve deeper into the world of cryptids, supernatural phenomenon, and creatures that lurked in the shadows, waiting for their next victim. And she would never be the same again.